That'll be $400 for this month. My father slid the handwritten invoice across the kitchen table like it was a restaurant bill. I was 16 years old, still in my work uniform from my shift at the diner, my backpack heavy with homework I hadn't started. Behind him, I could see my younger brother Marcus through the doorway, sprawled on the couch playing video games in the living room we weren't allowed to share anymore. Rent's due on the 1st, Dad added, tapping the paper. No exceptions. My mother stood at the sink, scrubbing a dish that was already clean, her silence louder than any words. I folded the invoice carefully, slipped it into my pocket, and said the only thing I could. Okay. That was the moment I stopped being their daughter and became their tenant. 10 years later, when the bank threatened foreclosure and my brother's law degree couldn't save them, they finally remembered I was family. But by then, I'd learned something they never taught me. Sometimes the best thing you can give someone is exactly what they gave you. Nothing. Before I tell you how I built my life from those $400 invoices, tell me where you're listening from, so I know I'm not the only one who had to pay their way out of childhood. From the outside, we looked like any other middle-class family in suburban Michigan. 3-bedroom ranch house, 2-car garage, a basketball hoop in the driveway that only Marcus used. My father, Donald Pierce, worked as a regional manager for a logistics company. My mother, Patricia, was a part-time bookkeeper who prided herself on keeping immaculate financial records. Everything in our house had a system, a price, a value assigned to it. My name's Claire Pierce. I'm 26 now, a property manager for a real estate firm in Detroit. I specialize in tenant relations, lease negotiations, and eviction procedures. The irony isn't lost on me. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the one who learned early that survival meant staying quiet, working hard, and never expecting anything you didn't earn yourself. Marcus, my younger brother by 3 years, was different. Charismatic, athletic, effortlessly charming. He was the kind of kid teachers loved, the kind parents showed off at barbecues. My father saw himself in Marcus, ambitious, confident, destined for success. My mother saw a son who needed protection, nurturing, investment. I was just Claire. Steady. Unremarkable. The kind of child who didn't require attention because she never caused problems. The rent started the week after my 16th birthday. I'd gotten my first job at Mel's Diner, washing dishes and bussing tables for $8.50 an hour plus tips. I came home exhausted that first Friday, my hands raw from industrial soap, and found my father waiting at the kitchen table with a calculator and a serious expression. "Sit down," he said. "We need to talk about your contribution to the household." I sat, confused. My mother hovered near the doorway, arms crossed, her face unreadable. "You're earning money now," Dad continued. "That means you're old enough to understand how the world works. Nothing is free, Claire. Not food, not utilities, not the roof over your head. Your mother and I have discussed it, and we think $400 a month is fair. That covers your room, meals, water, electricity, everything." I stared at him. $400? "It's actually quite reasonable," my mother added quietly. "If you rented a room anywhere else, you'd pay double that." "I'm 16, I said, my voice barely audible. "Exactly," Dad said, smiling like he was teaching me a valuable lesson. "You're learning responsibility early. Most kids don't get this advantage. You'll thank us later." Marcus walked in, grabbing a soda from the fridge. "What's going on?" "Nothing that concerns you," Dad said, his tone softening instantly. "How was practice?" Just like that, I became invisible again. I looked at the invoice, handwritten in my mother's perfect cursive, dated, with a breakdown of charges. Room, $250. Food, $100. Utilities, $50. It even had a line for my signature at the bottom. I signed it. What else could I do? That first month, I worked every shift I could get. Breakfast rushes, double shifts on weekends, closing shifts that ended at midnight. I'd come home smelling like grease and coffee, count my tips in my bedroom, and watched the numbers slowly climb toward $400. When the first of the month came, I handed my father an envelope of cash. He counted it carefully, wrote "paid" across my invoice, and filed it in a manila folder labeled "Claire, Household Contributions." "Good," he said. "This is how adults handle their obligations." I was too tired to respond. The pattern continued for 2 years. Every month, the invoice appeared on the first. Every month, I paid it. My grades suffered because I was working 30 hours a week while taking a full course load. I stopped doing extracurriculars. Stopped seeing friends. My life became work, school, sleep, repeat. Marcus, meanwhile, thrived. My parents paid for his travel baseball team, his SAT prep courses, his college application fees. When he got accepted to the University of Michigan, they threw a party. Neighbors came. There was a cake with his name in maize and blue frosting. My father gave a toast about hard work and achievement. I was working a double shift that day. I missed the whole thing. During Marcus's freshman year, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. I was upstairs, supposedly asleep, but their voices carried through the heating vents. "The tuition is manageable," my mother was saying. "But the housing, the meal plan, the books, it's adding up." "He needs to focus on his studies," Dad replied. "We can't have him working some part-time job and letting his grades slip. This is an investment in his future." "What about Claire? When she graduates, will we help her with college?" There was a long pause. "Claire's different. She's more independent. She'll figure it out. She always does." I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, and felt something inside me go cold and quiet. Not anger. Just a clear, final understanding. I was on my own. I had always been on my own. When I graduated high school, I didn't apply to universities. I couldn't afford them, and I wasn't about to ask my parents for help they'd never offer. Instead, I enrolled in community college, taking night classes while working full-time at the diner and a weekend job at a retail store. The rent never stopped. Even when I was barely home, sleeping 4 hours a night, living on vending machine coffee and determination. Every first of the month, the invoice appeared. Every month, I paid it. Then, 3 weeks after my 19th birthday, everything changed. I came home at 11 p.m. from my retail shift to find my belongings in garbage bags on the front porch. My room key no longer worked. I stood there, exhausted and confused, and called my father's cell phone. "Dad? My key doesn't work. Why is my stuff outside?" His voice was matter-of-fact. "Your mother and I decided it's time for you to find your own place. You're an adult now. Marcus needs more space, he's home for the summer and his room is too small for all his things. We're converting your room into a study for him." The world tilted. "You're kicking me out?" "We're encouraging independence," he corrected. "You've been paying rent anyway. Now you'll just pay it somewhere else. I have nowhere to go. You're resourceful, Claire. You'll figure it out. You always do." He hung up. I stood on that porch, surrounded by garbage bags holding everything I owned, and for the first time in 3 years, I cried. Not because I was shocked. Because I finally understood the truth. I had never been their daughter. I'd been a revenue stream. And when I was no longer convenient, I was disposable. I spent that night in my car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic with a broken heater and 160,000 miles on it. In the morning, I called my manager at the diner, Vanessa, a woman in her 50s who'd always been kind to me. When I explained what happened, she went quiet for a long moment. "Pack your stuff," she said finally. "You're staying with me until you get on your feet." Vanessa had a small apartment above a dry cleaner, 1 bedroom and a pull-out couch. She gave me the couch, refused to take rent, and told me the only payment she wanted was for me to finish school and never, ever let anyone treat me like I was disposable again. I lived there for 8 months. Worked my 2 jobs, took my classes, saved every dollar I could. Vanessa taught me how to budget, how to negotiate, how to see myself as someone with value. She was more of a mother to me in those months than Patricia had been in 19 years. By the time I was 20, I had my own studio apartment. By 22, I'd finished my associate degree in business management. By 24, I was working for a property management company, handling leases and tenant disputes. I was good at it. Really good. Because I understood both sides. I knew what it felt like to be powerless, paying money to someone who held all the cards. During those years, I didn't contact my parents. They didn't contact me either. Marcus would occasionally send a text, "Hey, how's it going?" But they were always superficial, the kind of messages you send out of obligation, not connection. I'd respond politely and leave it at that. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Marcus had graduated, passed the bar exam, and gotten hired at a corporate law firm in Grand Rapids. My parents threw another party. Another cake. Another toast about achievement. I wasn't invited. I didn't care anymore. Then, 2 months ago, my phone rang at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Claire." It was my mother's voice, strained and unfamiliar. "It's Mom." I sat up in bed, instantly alert. "What's wrong?" "We need to talk." "Can you come to the house today?" "Why?" "It's important. Family matter." "Please." I should have said no. Should have hung up, blocked the number, moved on with my life. But some small, stupid part of me, the part that was still 16 and desperate for their approval, wanted to know what could possibly be important enough for them to call me after 7 years of silence. "I'll be there at noon," I said. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was fading, the lawn overgrown. My father's car, the same Lexus he'd been so proud of, sat in the driveway with a cracked windshield. I parked on the street and walked up the path slowly, noticing details I'd been too young to understand before. The numbers on the mailbox were crooked. The porch railing was loose. My mother opened the door before I could knock. She looked older, tired, her hair more gray than brown now. "Claire. Thank you for coming." Her voice was formal, like I was a business associate, not her daughter. Inside, my father sat at the same kitchen table where he'd handed me those invoices years ago. He looked thinner, his face drawn. Marcus wasn't there. "Sit," Dad said, gesturing to the chair across from him. The same chair I'd sat in at 16. I remained standing. "What's this about?" My mother and father exchanged a glance. Then Dad cleared his throat. "We're in some financial trouble. The company I worked for downsized. I was let go 18 months ago. We've been living on savings, but it's run out. The bank is threatening foreclosure. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage." I kept my face neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that." "We need help," my mother said quietly. "We've exhausted all our options. Marcus is still establishing himself at his firm. His salary isn't enough to cover this kind of debt. But you're doing well now, aren't you? In property management?" Understanding dawned slowly, like a cold sunrise. "You want money." "A loan," Dad corrected quickly. "We'd pay you back, of course. With interest. We just need about $30,000 to catch up on payments and get back on track." The number hung in the air. $30,000. I thought about the $400 invoices, the garbage bags on the porch, the years of silence. I thought about Vanessa's couch and working myself to exhaustion at 19 while they threw parties for Marcus. Why would I do that? I asked quietly. My father's expression hardened. Because we're family. Family. I let the word sit there, tasting its bitterness. Is that what we are? My mother stepped forward. Claire, I know we haven't been perfect. You charged me rent at 16, I interrupted, my voice still calm but carrying a weight that made her stop. You took $400 a month from a child working minimum wage. That's $9,600 over 2 years. Then you kicked me out so Marcus could have a bigger room. You paid for his college, his SAT prep, his baseball team. You invested in his future. You told me I'd figure it out because I always did. My father stood up. We taught you responsibility. You taught me I wasn't worth investing in. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and showed them the screen. I have $47,000 in savings. I could give you the $30,000 you need. I could save this house. I locked the phone and put it back in my pocket. But I'm not going to. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the refrigerator seemed to hold its breath. You'd let us lose our home, my mother whispered. The way you let me lose mine? I asked. I slept in my car, Mom. I was 19 years old, working 2 jobs and going to school, and I slept in my car because you needed space for Marcus's textbooks. My father's face flushed. You're being vindictive. No, I said quietly. I'm being exactly what you taught me to be. Independent. Resourceful. Someone who figures it out. I moved toward the door. You wanted me to learn that nothing is free. That everything has a price. Congratulations. I learned. Claire, please, my mother said, tears starting to form. We made mistakes. We're sorry. But we're your parents. You were my landlords, I corrected. And not very good ones. You violated the lease when you evicted me without notice. In my professional opinion, you'd lose in court. I opened the door. I hope you figure it out. You're resourceful people. You always said so. If you walk out that door, you're not our daughter anymore, my father said, his voice shaking with rage. I turned back, looked him in the eye, and smiled sadly. I stopped being your daughter the first time you handed me an invoice, Dad. I just didn't know it yet. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw them standing in the doorway, looking small and lost. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I felt nothing but a quiet, settled peace. 3 days later, Marcus called. What the hell, Claire? Mom called me crying. You seriously won't help them? Did they tell you about the rent? I asked calmly. What rent? They charged me $400 a month starting when I was 16. Kicked me out at 19 with no warning. Did they mention that part? Silence. Marcus, they paid for your entire college education. Your housing, your meal plan, your bar exam prep. Do you know how much that cost? That's different. How? He struggled for an answer. They invested in my future. Exactly, I said. They invested in yours. Not mine. So now you get to invest in theirs. That's how family works, right? Everyone contributes. I can't afford $30,000. Then I guess they'll have to figure it out, I said. They're resourceful. They always told me so. He hung up. I blocked his number. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from a lawyer. My parents were threatening to sue me for financial elder abuse and withholding familial support. I read it once, then called my own lawyer, a woman named Sandra who specialized in family law. Can they do this? I asked. She read the letter, then laughed. They can try. But there's no legal obligation for adult children to support their parents, especially when those parents have demonstrable history of financial exploitation of a minor. If anything, you'd have grounds to sue them for unlawful collection of rent from a dependent child. I don't want to sue them, I said. I know. But they need to know you could. She drafted a response outlining the facts, the rent payment starting at age 16, the eviction at 19, the disparate treatment between siblings, and the legal definition of financial abuse of a minor. She CC'd the Michigan Attorney General's office for good measure. The threats stopped immediately. 6 weeks after that meeting at the kitchen table, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Claire Pierce? A woman's voice, professional. Yes? This is Jennifer Hastings from Great Lakes Realty. I'm handling the foreclosure sale for 4726 Maple Drive. I noticed you're a licensed property manager, and I wanted to give you first notice before the auction. The property is going for $125,000, significantly under market value. Are you interested? My parents' house. Their home. Going to auction. When's the sale? I asked. Next Tuesday. 10 a.m. at the county courthouse. I should have said no. Should have let it go to some investor who'd flip it for profit. But that stupid, stubborn part of me, the part that still remembered playing in that backyard, still remembered what it felt like to believe I belonged somewhere, made me ask the next question. Can I view it before the auction? Absolutely. I drove there the next day. My parents' cars were gone, they'd moved to a rental across town, according to the neighbors. The house was empty, echoing. I walked through rooms that had once felt so important, so permanent. My old bedroom, now painted beige and converted into Marcus's study, bookshelves empty and abandoned. The kitchen where I'd signed those invoices. The porch where I'd found my belongings in garbage bags. It was just a house. Wood and drywall and memories that didn't belong to me anymore. On Tuesday, I sat in the courthouse auction room. A handful of investors flipped through property listings, calculating margins. When 4726 Maple Drive came up, the bidding started at $100,000. One investor bid $105,000. Another bid $110,000. Then silence. The auctioneer looked around. Going once. I raised my paddle. $125,000. Every head turned. The auctioneer blinked. That's the reserve price, ma'am. You don't need to go that high. I know, I said. $125,000. Sold. I bought my parents' house. The paperwork took 3 weeks. When the deed was transferred to my name, I sat in my apartment staring at the document. I owned the house that had never really been my home. The house that taught me everything has a price, including love. My father called the day after the sale went through. You bought it. I did. Why? His voice was hollow, defeated. Because I could, I said simply. Because I wanted you to know what it feels like when someone makes a decision about your home and you have no say in it. So this is revenge. No, I said, and meant it. Revenge would be kicking you out with no notice, putting your belongings in trash bags, and telling you to figure it out. That would be revenge. This is just business. We raised you. You charged me rent, I said, cutting him off. You treated me like a tenant. So now I'm your landlord. That's what you taught me, Dad. Everything's a transaction. He hung up without another word. A week later, I received a desperate email from my mother. Long, rambling, full of explanations that weren't quite apologies. She mentioned Marcus's potential, my resilience, their pride, their fear. She talked about mistakes and misunderstandings and how family should forgive. I read it 3 times, each time feeling less than the time before. Then I drafted a response. Short. Simple. When I was 16, would have given anything to hear you say you were proud of me. When I was 19 and homeless, would have given anything for you to say you were sorry. Now, I don't need either. I hope you find a rental you can afford. I recommend budgeting carefully. Rent is expensive these days. Best, Claire. I hit send and felt something inside me finally, truly let go. 3 months later, I put the house on the market. Not out of spite. Out of practicality. It was a good property, in a decent neighborhood, worth more than I'd paid. A young family bought it, parents with 2 kids, both girls. They walked through during the showing, the kids running excitedly from room to room, talking about which one would be theirs, how they'd decorate. The mother looked at me as we signed the final papers. This is our first home. We've been saving for 6 years. Our girls are so happy. I smiled. Make good memories here. After they left, I stood in the empty house one last time. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warming the hardwood floors. I thought about the girl who used to live here, who paid rent at 16, who believed she had to earn love with every dollar. I wasn't her anymore. I locked the door behind me, dropped the keys in the mail slot, and walked away from 4726 Maple Drive for the last time. My parents never knew I'd sold it. I didn't tell them. It wasn't their business anymore. 2 years have passed since then. I'm 26 now, an assistant director at my firm, managing a portfolio of residential properties across Detroit. I'm good at my job because I understand something most people don't. A house is just a structure. Home is something you build inside yourself. Vanessa, the woman who gave me her couch when I had nothing, passed away last spring. I was with her at the end, holding her hand the way she'd once held mine. She left me her apartment building in her will, 8 units, fully paid off, managed well. You'll know what to do with it, her note said. I kept 1 unit for myself and rented the others at below market rates to people who needed a break. Single mothers. Kids aging out of foster care. People escaping bad situations. I don't charge anyone under 21 rent. Not ever. Marcus reached out 6 months ago. A short text, I'm sorry for what they did. I didn't know. I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late to matter. My parents moved to Arizona, according to a mutual acquaintance. My father found part-time work. My mother volunteers at a church. They never call. I never reach out. We exist in parallel silence, connected by blood but nothing else. Last week, I got a letter from a young woman named Sophia. She was one of my tenants 3 years ago, a teenager working her way through community college. She'd just graduated with her bachelor's degree and wanted to thank me. You gave me a safe place when I had nowhere to go, she wrote. You taught me that kindness doesn't have to come with an invoice. I cried reading that letter. Not sad tears. Relief. Proof that the cycle could break. That the girl who paid rent at 16 had grown into a woman who understood the difference between a transaction and a gift. This morning, I walked through my building, checking on repairs, greeting tenants. On the 2nd floor, I passed apartment 2C, the unit I keep for emergencies. A 19-year-old named Marcus just moved in last week. His parents kicked him out when he came out as gay. He's working at Target and taking online classes. He offered to pay rent. I told him the same thing Vanessa once told me, the only payment I want is for you to finish school and never let anyone make you feel disposable again. His eyes filled with tears. Thank you. I smiled and handed him a key. Welcome home. Later, sitting in my own apartment, I pulled out an old manila folder I've kept all these years. Inside were the invoices my father gave me, each one marked, paid, in his precise handwriting. 48 invoices total. Proof of every month I paid to exist in their house. I took them to the fireplace, struck a match, and watched them burn. The paper curled and blackened, the numbers disappearing into ash and smoke. All that documentation of my worthlessness, reduced to nothing. Outside my window, the Detroit skyline glowed in the dusk. Somewhere in this city were kids working minimum wage jobs, kids who felt invisible, kids who were learning the wrong lessons about their value. I couldn't save them all. But I could save some. And that was enough. If you've ever been charged for love that should have been free, you know this feeling. It's not about revenge. It's about understanding your worth never came from their approval. Share your story in the comments, someone out there needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories about building yourself from nothing but invoices and ashes.